The film opens with a woman, Alethea Binney, narrating a story about herself, which she says she will tell as a fantasy. She is arriving in Istanbul for a convention where she will speak with other scholars, as Alethea studies mythology. Upon arriving, a small man approaches Alethea and puts his hand on her luggage handle, whispering something to her and emitting a strange glowing energy from his hand. She is confused by the strange man's actions, but he disappears before her colleagues arrive at the airport. Alethea joins her colleagues as they head to the convention. She delivers a speech on mythology and its connection to reality when she sees a large, metal-looking man in the audience. As she walks away, the metal man appears to charge after her and opens his mouth, which causes Alethea to pass out. The other professors help her to her feet, and she gives a thumbs up to the audience. Alethea is invited by Professor Gunhan to an antique shop. She finds a glass bottle that the shop owner describes as being blown centuries earlier. While Gunhan offers to buy Alethea something that looks nicer, she is fascinated by the bottle and asks for it. Back in her hotel room, Alethea cleans the bottle since it has fire damage. When she brushes it with her electric toothbrush, the bottle opens and unleashes a dark-colored smoke that fills the room. A voice calls out to her, saying words in a language she doesn't understand, but upon realizing this, he begins to speak English and introduces himself as a Jinn. The Jinn appears gigantic at first, but he is able to bring himself down to a normal but still imposing size, and he demonstrates his powers to Alethea by absorbing knowledge from the TV and grabbing a projection of Albert Einstein from the screen. He also tells Alethea about his powers to grant wishes, but states the limits to his powers, such as being unable to grant immortality or absolve sins. His ultimate desire is to be free from his imprisonment, but Alethea thinks he is trying to trick her. Later, the Jinn settles in and puts on a hotel robe similar to what she is currently wearing. He asks her to tell him about herself, and Alethea reveals some information about herself. She went to an all-girls school and created an imaginary romance with a boy that she wrote about called Enzo. She also tells the Jinn that she was once married to a man named Jack, and she was pregnant with a boy they planned to call Enzo, but it is implied that Alethea miscarried and then her marriage ended. Her ex-husband accused her of being distant and cold, all while starting a relationship with a younger woman. The Jinn listens intently about Alethea's past, and then proceeds to reveal to Alethea how he came to be imprisoned. Thousands of years earlier, the Jinn was in love with Queen Sheba, but King Solomon sought her as well. Alethea is confused, as the version of the story that she is familiar with has Sheba seeking Solomon and not the other way round. However, the Jinn assure her that this was not the case. He describes Sheba as beauty itself, and Solomon desperately wanted her. He traveled far and won her over by playing the most beautiful music that she had ever heard, though it was evident that Solomon was no ordinary man. The Jinn reveals that Solomon was able to communicate with non-human beings, such as animals and other creatures named like himself. One day, Sheba asked Solomon to tell her something that she always wanted to hear, and with the help of his otherworldly friends, he was able to do this and win her heart. While Solomon took Sheba to bed, he sensed the Jinn's presence and imprisoned him in a brass bottle, which he threw into the ocean, leaving him there for over 2,000 years. The Jinn continues telling Alethea of what has led him to this point. After the incident with Sheba and Solomon, the brass bottle was found by a slave girl named Gultan, who was in love with a handsome prince named Mustafa of Constantinople. She found the bottle the Jinn was stuck in and released it, and as thanks, he granted her the wish of Mustafa falling in love with her, and she became pregnant with his child. However, Mustafa's father, Sultan Suleiman, had a favored concubine, Hurrem, who convinced Suleiman that Mustafa was making a play for his throne and might deceive him to do so. Hurrem had her own agenda, as she sought to place one of her own children on the throne over Mustafa. While away from the palace, Suleiman hired assassins to murder Mustafa and go after Gultan. Mustafa trusted his father, though his father ruthlessly had him assassinated, even after he tried to plead for mercy. Meanwhile, the Jinn begged Gultan to make a third wish to save herself, as he had learned of Hurrem's plot to eliminate Mustafa and all his potential heirs. Gultan, however, found the Jinn's words hard to believe and refused to make another wish. Before she could escape, and with the Jinn incapacitated by another Jinn who was under Hurrem's command, Gultan met her end, and the Jinn was once again locked in the brass bottle, as he could only be free if the one who released him makes 3 wishes. Alethea is now very interested, though she is aware that there is more to the story, as the bottle she had bought wasn't a brass one. She is curious how the Jinn ended up in the bottle that she acquired at the antique store. The Jinn explains further, revealing that long after Gultan passed, there lived 2 young princes in the same palace, Murad and Ibrahim. As children, the two came close to finding the brass bottle where the Jinn remained trapped, but they could barely move the stone where Gultan had hidden it. Murad went off to fight before he could take over his kingdom. Their mother left Ibrahim in a room with lines of his choosing. Ibrahim had a preference for more voluptuous and heavy women. While away at battle, Murad had become a violent and bloodthirsty soldier, casually killing other men for sport. The young prince eventually became a man who was feared throughout the kingdom and was in line to become the next king. However, when Murad returned home, he longed to fight again. His psyche was broken from war, and he was constantly paranoid that his enemies were trying to usurp his throne. Even his brother, whose only real interest was to satisfy his lust. Murad's mother distracted him with hobbies. The only one that caught his interest was listening to the stories of an old storyteller. Murad enjoyed the old man's stories so much that the two of them became close friends. Then the old man passed away, and Murad became a husk of his former self due to grief. The Jinn saw this as an opportunity to lure Murad to the bathroom where his bottle was hidden, though Murad didn't have the strength to open the door as he had become so sickly. Murad eventually succumbed to his illness, and Ibrahim was forced to become ruler against his wishes. He retained his harem of naming his favorite Sugar Lump. One day while in the baths, Sugar Lump slipped, landed, and smashed the stone that was guarding the brass bottle. The Jinn was finally released, but despite him trying to get Sugar Lump to make a wish, she rejects his gifts and wishes he is sent back to where he came from. So he is once again forced to be imprisoned in the bottle, which Sugar Lump tosses into the ocean. Back in the present, Alethea becomes annoyed with the Jinn and his badgering for her to make wishes. They get into an argument, culminating in Alethea saying that she is beginning to wish that they never met. This causes the Jinn to panic, as this has happened to him before. The Jinn tells one more story about a young scholar named Zafir. She was married at the age of 12 to a much older man who favored her over his two older wives, who didn't like Zafir as a result. When she wasn't satisfying her husband's needs, Zafir pursued knowledge. One day, her husband discovered the brass bottle and gave it to her as a gift. Upon releasing the Jinn, Zafir wished for expanded knowledge. Some time had passed, and the Jinn began to fall in love with Zafir and showed her his magic, including a new bottle he made for himself, the same one Alethea found. Zafir gained more and more knowledge. She became a problem solver and inventor, and the Jinn felt as if he finally found a home with her. Her husband kept seeking her for his pleasure, and when she was done with that, she would ask him to leave coldly and get back to her work. However, Zafir grows overwhelmed, and when the Jinn attempts to hide himself in the bottle until she is better, Zafir begins to panic and grows increasingly confused, and just then, she uses her last wish as the Jinn is making his way into the bottle. She wishes that they'd never met, and as a result, she forgets all about him. Once again, the Jinn had lost someone he loved and was again, cruelly, locked in a bottle. After the Jinn finishes his stories, Alethea informs him that she is finally ready to make her first wish. She approaches the Jinn, standing very close, and states that she wishes that the two of them fall in love. The Jinn picks her up, and they appear to begin to make love as cosmic imagery surrounds them. In the near future, Alethea is at the airport, carrying the Jinn in a small salt shaker. Before she can make it out, she is stopped by security, who want to examine her belongings. One of the security officers takes the salt shaker from her and puts it in an X-ray machine. Alethea cries out, asking him to stop, worried what the X-ray machine may do to the Jinn. However, the security officers can't find anything within the bottle and hand Alethea back the shaker. Alethea arrives back at her home in London and places the Jinn's salt shaker next to some other glass ornaments in her living room. However, to her surprise, the Jinn doesn't come out when she calls to him. While out for fresh air, Alethea is bothered by the behavior of her two neighbors, two older ladies who are ignorant and bigoted. Alethea is angered by their insensitive and rude remarks and marches back inside, while the two ladies further insult her. To her surprise, the Jinn is finally out of his bottle, and he convinces her to be better than them by offering them a chickpea snack that the Jinn first offered to her. The women meet the Jinn and are cordial with him. Over the next few days, the Jinn and Alethea live together happily. Whenever she finishes work, Alethea rushes home to the man, or Jinn to be exact. It's clear she loves spending time with him. Some time passes, and the Jinn begins to grow weaker, with his body appearing to decay due to cell towers and satellite transmissions affecting the material that his body is made of. Alethea tries to help and uses her second and third wishes to get the Jinn to speak again, and for him to be healed, meaning he will be free and return to his own world. 3 years later, Alethea has written a new book. She is surprised to see the Jinn, now fully healed, having come to visit her. As they walk off together, Alethea's closing narration states that the Jinn would continue to visit her every now and then.